And invite to co-host. Yep. Aaron wants the mic. Anyone else want the mic in Twitter Space? Before we get started here? Eric, okay. Anybody else? Katerina, okay. Anyone else? Sorry, okay. No. Messy, okay.
How is everyone?
All good. I think we're good to go. Okay.
Good.
All right. I'm ready. If you're ready, let's check out the news.
Yes.
Okay.
Ready.
All right. Hold on. 10 more seconds. All right. Starting on time. Let's make Evan.
Sure, it sounds extra sexy today. Why? You changed your microphone?
Cheryl from Sexy Cheryl.
Yeah. You using the...
Oh, I have my earphone on. Someone's in the house.
Oh. That's Cheryl being respectful of her housemates. Okay. Talk dirty like your housemates are home, Cheryl. Okay. So.
What's going on here today, guys?
I think it's the
That is such a Clubhouse thing to do. I remember a few folks when Clubhouse first started, like famous YouTubers who came on, they often spent time in their bathroom in the middle of the night talking to other strangers and friends because the bathroom was the most isolating and quietest place in their home where they weren't disturbing anyone else. So that's pretty awesome, Cheryl.
Oh my goodness. They need to rate.
Oh, lucky Cheryl. Coming.
You've reached the X-rated after-hours version of Tech News Around the World. Where
is this going to be an R-rated conversation? Because I have to leave if that's the case.
Keep talking, Cheryl, please. Normally I say shut up.
Cheryl, don't stop. Well, actually, let's go ahead.
Kyoko is in the Clubhouse room.
Okay, so this is an appropriate. Let's change things up a little bit in light of our special edition today, because we left you hanging yesterday with a really bizarre headline that, well, let me find it if I can find it, that a bunch of soldiers in Thailand, hundreds of them in fact, were forced to do a group masturbation to completion before going to the showers. You remember we left with that headline when we last met? Yes. Who could forget?
You mean I inspired you to talk about this topic?
Right. No.
Cheryl?
And I'm thinking maybe that's the reason
well,
why
there's
Cheryl...
an update to this story because news in Thailand travels very quickly. So everyone's talking about this in Thailand, and this has led to the Ministry of Defense to make a formal statement because these are soldiers and that falls under the Ministry of Defense. So now the headline today is that the Ministry of Defense makes a statement after about the post, a Facebook post claiming that soldiers were forced to masturbate in response to a post on social media claiming that 168 soldiers, which is oddly specific detail that they happen to know the exact number, were forced to masturbate before showering. Thailand's Ministry of Defense made a statement saying that there is no policy where senior officials are encouraged to order that kind of punishment to soldiers. There you go.
It just got out of hand.
That's compliment. I thought it's some kind of ceremony.
It got out of hand, Evan says. Oh boy. Yeah.
But this is more healthy for guys, right?
What? This is more healthy for the guys. Yeah, well, I guess that's the Japanese way of looking at it, perhaps. So, but interesting that Thailand's Ministry of Defense had to come out to make a statement that there is no policy that encourages this kind of behavior.
But there should be.
As if people thought that there was. It's not against the religion. And they also added that it is extremely inappropriate. Reports in Thai media say that the ministry will investigate the claims of sexual harassment amongst soldiers, and disciplinary action will be imposed immediately if officials find that harassment has taken place. An image was
So I have a serious question, Tyler.
Sure.
I've never been to Thailand. I don't know Thai culture. Is it a very conservative culture, despite what you read about sex parlors?
Correct. Yeah.
Or is it a liberal culture?
No, it's incredibly conservative to the degree that Thais swim fully clothed on the beach because nudity is incredibly disrespectful, and so Thais go to the beach fully clothed and go into the ocean fully clothed. That's how conservative it is.
Wow.
Are you sure? I thought they're always in bikini.
Am I sure? I only lived there every day for the past 6 years.
Well, why is it considered? This may be a naive question, but can you help us understand why it's considered offensive or rude to be unclothed? Because that's opposite of Germany. I came from Germany, lived there for a few years, so I'm looking at it from the exact opposite direction. So some context would help.
Yeah. You go to a sauna in Germany and it's mixed nudity. It's wild, and no one blinks an eye.
Right. Well, same in Sweden, actually, in Finland and the Nordics. So, and Japan, actually, you go into Japan bathhouses, and nudity is not a problem. So the issue is that in Thailand, even being drunk, smoking, drinking, doing these kinds of things is perceived as very kind of lower status, lower class, vulgar, and they aspire to be, to them wearing nice clothes and having a nice car really is meaningful, and that nudity is incredibly vulgar, incredibly base, and they associate that with kind of being depraved, and hence nobody wants to be associated with those demographics, and they don't want to be stigmatized. They don't want to be looked down. They're incredibly careful of their reputations, and they never, ever, ever want to be looked down upon. They're incredibly sensitive, even way more than Japanese are. And as Cheryl can tell you, I lived in Japan for many years as well before moving to Thailand. And Asians in general are very sensitive about how others perceive them. Americans are completely oblivious and care not how others perceive them. We are immune to embarrassment, as Donald Trump is a great living example, to the astonishment of the rest of the world. I mean, he's just immune to being embarrassed. And Americans,
I agree with this notion, Tyler. Asians, I know Asian, and being from that culture, how nobility is viewed with being fully clothed, conservative, not
right.
only with outward expressions, but also the way you speak and you think and you present yourself.
Right.
And nobody wish to associate with that kind of behavior.
Right. They're hyper sensitive about how other people might talk about them in their absence in a vulgar kind of a way. And so you don't ever want to give the appearance of being, vulgar. So, they intentionally don't take their clothes off, or show their legs or their shoulders even. And they make tourists cover their shoulders and their legs or whatever when they go into traditional Thai places like palaces and temples and things in Bangkok and what have you. So it's that's sort of the cultural background. I hope that helps. Anyway, so that's yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, but that's why this issue, and as bizarre as this behavior is, this could be Thailand is a kind of a crazy place. Crazy things happen, and this whole issue with this Ministry of Defense and these 168 soldiers. Yeah, well, now they've got it's certainly they have their hands full. So we will leave it at that. But that's just the follow up to where we left it hanging yesterday. No pun intended. So the next story, well, the first big story today is from Kuo. And that name should ring a bell if you join us every day. Kuo is the world's leading Apple leaker, and he's back in the news. He was in the news a week ago, or on the day before Black Friday, leaking Apple's AR headset, which will be coming out in late 2022. And he's back in the news today with two new leaks. An update about the AR headset, which we'll get to in a moment, but he's also leaking that there will be Airpods Pros version 2, the first update since 2019 when the AirPod Pros came out, which he says will launch in Q4 2022, which means they will debut for the world at the annual September iPhone launch event, which will be the second Tuesday in September, historically. With a new design similar to the Beats Fit Pro, improved chip, and more. And then the update to Kuo himself is giving another update about Apple's first AR headset, saying that it will weigh between 300 grams and 400 grams, which is maybe a little lighter than most people thought it would weigh. That's about a pound. And will enter, I think they're intentionally going to try and make it under a pound just for the quote, the kind of impact of saying that in English, and will enter mass production in late Q4 2022. Again, signifying very clearly that it will be launched publicly at the annual Apple iPhone launch day event, which is almost always the second Tuesday of September. So we have that to look forward to. And then it says, one final detail, Apple's planning a lighter second generation headset for launch in 2024, meaning it will be a biannual, or is that a dual annual, where they'll do it every 2 years. They'll come out with a new AR headset every 2 years. There you go. The next headline is that Facebook launches professional mode, letting creators monetize their profiles, and a Reels Play bonus program offering eligible creators up to $35,000 per month. Now, we're going to have I've already taken a glimpse at the other headlines of today, and there's a ton of them. And a bunch of them disproportionately talk about monetization on social media. And here it comes in a huge, huge, huge way. And when monetization comes to one platform, and we could argue that YouTube was really one of the first platforms where people started making millions of dollars very consistently. And the YouTube ecosystem for creators is just exploding. That's now going to go into all of the social media apps in a very big way, all simultaneously, as you're going to see in the headlines that we have today. The first one is this Facebook professional mode, letting creators monetize their own profile pages. Eligible creators will earn money. Facebook has launched the new professional mode for profiles that will let eligible creators earn money without the need to create a separate page. The feature is part of Facebook's $1 billion investment in creators that includes bonuses for Instagram influencers and an expansion to the STARS program announced yesterday. What's the STARS program? I'm glad you asked. Here it is. So pause that article I was just reading to read about the STARS program. Zuckerberg took to his own Facebook post profile to say that the new feature to support creators on Facebook landing this week includes an update to STARS for fans to support creators. The metaverse will unlock new opportunities for creators to make a living, and I'm excited about the foundation we're building now. Details and comments below. He says this: we're including a STARS store website where people can buy stars at lower prices, STARS bonus programs for our $1 billion investment in creators, and a fun new way for people to send stars via STARS Party. December is also STARS Fest, which means sales on stars, double earnings bonuses, creator competitions, and exclusive creator live streams. More creator updates coming later this week, including giving more creators access to monetization and insights on Facebook, and new ways for creators to engage their community, have conversations, and grow their following, plus controls and support features. And what he's talking about with these stars is it's the ability to send I'm seeing this already. I don't know if anyone else is, where if you're watching a video in Facebook, it will say, would you like to share a star with this content creator, the person who made this video? And you can buy 100 stars for $1. So they are essentially a penny, 1 cent, 1% of $1, or 1 Japanese yen, or, whatever 1/100th of a euro is called. And because they're all about the same. And yeah, you can give stars. It's like a micro payment. It's like a virtual currency, like a casino poker chip of sorts. And that's stars. And that's going to be the foundation of the creator economy in Facebook for the time being. I'm sure they're going to pivot that eventually into other interesting things, their own crypto coin perhaps. But now back to the main article. It says, as part of Reels, Facebook is planning to add the ability to create longer 60-second reels, save drafts mid-creation, and create compositions from multiple clips. Those features are coming soon, and it's planning to expand Reels to more countries next year too. Professional mode also lets profiles see the same kind of post and audience analytics data that page users gets, including shares, reactions, and comments. You can also see your follower growth over time. There's a caveat that, not surprisingly, involves privacy. Once you turn on professional mode, anyone can follow you and see your public content in their feed, Facebook said. However, you'll still be able to limit specific posts or updates to friends only. Facebook is playing catch-up to rival platforms with the creator community, particularly TikTok, which recently passed 3 billion downloads and is ahead of Facebook in user engagement. On top of the new profiles, it recently announced the Stars Store website that lets creators earn cash from followers without paying App Store commissions. Professional mode is testing a limited number of profiles today in the United States, but will be expanding to more people in the US soon and more countries in the coming months. And as they hinted there, there's a related article from TechCrunch that says Facebook launches a website that lets fans buy digital tokens called stars to tip Facebook creators using Facebook Pay, avoiding App Store payment commissions. There you go. And there's a headline coming up soon about TikTok social shopping and other related headlines about sellers going big, creators going big on social commerce, selling stuff through their social media platforms. But the next article is from the Financial Times. They say they have sources that Facebook and Snapchat and other iOS developers continue to collect anonymized and aggregated data on users for targeted ads despite Apple's privacy changes. Group's acknowledged shift lets companies follow a looser interpretation of its privacy rules. Apple has allowed let's read this one. 1 second here. Apple reaches quiet truce over iPhone privacy changes. Apple has allowed app developers to collect data from its 1 billion iPhone users for targeted advertising, and an unacknowledged shift that lets companies follow a much looser interpretation of its controversial privacy policy. In May, Apple communicated its privacy changes to the wider public, launching an advert that featured a harassed man whose daily activities were closely monitored by an ever-growing group of strangers. When his iPhone prompted him to ask app not to track, he clicked it and they vanished. Apple's message to potential customers was clear. If you choose an iPhone, you're choosing privacy. But 7 months later, companies including Snap and Facebook have been allowed to keep sharing user-level signals from iPhones as long as that data is anonymized and aggregated rather than tied to specific users. For instance, Snap has told investors that it plans to share data from its 306 million users, including those who ask Snap not to track, so advertisers can gain a more complete real-time view on how ad campaigns are working. Any professional identifiable data will be obfuscated and aggregated. Similarly, Facebook operations chief Sheryl Sandberg said that Facebook was engaged in a multi-year effort to rebuild the ad infrastructure using more aggregated and anonymized data. These companies point out that Apple has told developers they may not derive data from a device for the purpose of uniquely identifying it. This means they can observe signals from an iPhone at a group level, enabling ads that can still be tailored to cohorts, which means groups aligned with certain behavior but not associated with unique IDs. And they're going to swear up and down, yeah, we promise we're going to be good little data hoarders. And in reality, this whole thing is a complete ruse. For geeks who know how data works, they still are able to determine who you are using third-party sources that we've been covering in the past 48 hours. We had 2 huge stories in the past 48 hours of 2 huge apps that know your location and your identity and everything else, that are providing these kind of directories of identities. And so this is just becoming a complete silly little game in the back end. They desperately need to know who you are. They're going to pretend like, it's just being abstracted and obfuscated and kind of pushed in the dark a little bit, but it's sort of business as usual at the end of the day. And now you know why these really popular apps are willing to do some really shady stuff in the background that we read about yesterday and the day before. There were 2 really amazing, huge examples of companies selling data that they shouldn't, and it enables this whole kind of shadowy industry of identities and tracking of users. It's truly massive, and it's worth an incredible amount to these companies and their business models. So it will live on until, because politicians can't even get their heads around what's happening in the background. So the next big article, shall we, is from it's about Twitter. Twitter is testing a new process for reporting harmful tweets that lets US users describe what happened and will use the data to improve its responses. And let's read it directly from Twitter rather than from everyone who's regurgitating that headline, because they will no doubt screw it up. Twitter's new reporting process centers on human-first design. If you ever reported a tweet, you may have been frustrated by this process, which is a typical one online. First, you report an item, then a list of violations pop up. Which one is it? Is it suspicious, abusive, or both? You tick one of the boxes. Twitter receives millions of reports, everything from misinformation and spam to harassment and hate speech. It's their way of telling Twitter, hey, this isn't right, or I don't feel safe. Based on user feedback, research, and an understanding that today's reporting process wasn't making enough people feel safe and heard, the company decided to do something about it. That's why Twitter is testing an overhauled reporting process that will make it easier for people to alert them to harmful behavior. The new approach, which is currently being tested with a small group in the US, simplifies the reporting process. It lifts the burden from the individual to the one who has to interpret. It lifts the burden from the individual to be the one who has to interpret the violation at hand. Instead, it asks them what happened. This method is called symptoms first, where Twitter first asks the person what's going on. Here's the analogy the team uses. Say you're in the midst of an emergency medical situation. If you break your leg, the doctor doesn't say, is your leg broken? They say, where does it hurt? The idea is, first, let's try and find out what's happening instead of asking you to diagnose the issue. In moments of urgency, people need to be heard and feel supported. Asking them to open the medical dictionary and saying, point to the one thing that's your problem is something people aren't going to do, said Brian, a data scientist on the health user experience team that spearheaded this new process. If they're walking in to get help, what they're going to do well is describe what is happening to them in the moment. Okay, makes sense. So to make the people who are filing the complaints feel better about their complaining process, simply say what happened and let them type away for days and days until they feel satiated and satisfied, like our friends in Thailand, and then they feel like they've been heard, instead of forcing them to say, what is this complaint about? Pick one of these 4 things. And if it isn't one of those 4 things, or if it's 2 of those 4 things, now the person feels more angered than they did when they arrived, and now you, the platform, are part of the problem. So rather than making you, the platform, part of the problem, just leave a blank space saying what's on your mind and let them rant endlessly. And then it turns out, what do you know, they feel far better about the experience of being able to endlessly ramble into a cavernous vacuum. So the yeah, how they are going to interpret random input like that is a really good question. Maybe that's some really clever machine learning in the back end now. Maybe the algorithms are good enough to be able to parse all of that natural language to categorize it into the right areas. So the next article is from Bloomberg that Google is suing two Russians that Google claims help run a botnet that has infected more than 1 million devices and uses command and control server addresses stored on Bitcoin's blockchain. It's kind of bad news. Let's take a little look here. Are we ready? Here we go. It says Google's suing two Russian nationals, it claims, are part of a criminal enterprise that has silently infiltrated more than 1 million computers and devices around the world, creating a modern, technological, and borderless incarnation of organized crime. In a complaint being unsealed Tuesday in the U.S. District Court of Southern District of New York, Google named two defendants, Dmitry Starovikov and Alexander Filipov, as well as 15 unnamed individuals. Google claims the defendants have created a botnet known as Glupteba to use for illicit purposes, including the theft and unauthorized use of Google users' login and account information. And the Glupteba botnet stands out from others because its technical sophistication uses blockchain technology to protect itself from disruption, Google said in the complaint. At the moment, the power of the botnet could be used in a ransomware attack or distributed denial of service attack, Google said. Whenever one of the Glupteba command and control servers is shut down, it could scan the blockchain to find a new command and control server domain address according to, oh, that's clever. This tactic makes the botnet extremely difficult to disrupt through conventional cybersecurity techniques, which are focused on disabling these servers and server domains, according to some experts here. This is the first known case of a botnet using this approach on the blockchain. Very clever. Okay, so the next one is that there was a massive Amazon Web Service outage 24 hours ago, which took down Amazon's Flex and Dolphin apps and Ring and Disney and all kinds of stuff. Apparently it's back up, and the AWS outage, they're now kind of are confident that everything's running smoothly again. And Amazon says it resolved the underlying issues that caused the AWS outage and is working towards recovery of any impaired services. And that's pretty straightforward. The next one from Axios about Roku. Who cares about Roku? And the next one's from the New York Times. Ahead of a congressional hearing, Adam Mosseri, the boss of Instagram, outlines Instagram parental controls coming in March, including monitoring time spent and bulk deleting of posts. So parents can be more responsible for their kids, so that you can stop claiming that Instagram's hurting your kids. Because, you're kind of the parent. You're kind of in control of their phone and what they do on that phone. So they're going to give you the tools, to be a responsible parent. So that you stop having Instagram raise your children. The next one is a brand new one from the New York Times that after Tesla added over 12 video games that can be played while driving, critics argue the company is compromising road user safety on top of autopilot issues. So the feature raises questions about whether Tesla is compromising safety as it rushes to add new technologies. Well, they even have a karaoke system, as I understand it, inside the...
Yes, we do have the karaoke system. It does not affect the safety, especially if it's self-driving, because I don't get the association at all. The car is really good at sensing everything that's happening outside.
Well, the problem is Americans are a very unique breed, and we demand that if anything happens, we can blame somebody else for our own negligence. So it has to be American proof. That's the problem. This won't be an
But we
issue.
we use that game or the video or whatever karaoke when it's parking, and usually when you're driving, you're not doing all of that. And if you have the FSD, like fully FSD capabilities, then the car is pretty safe to drive itself.
I think the bigger standard here would probably be a place like Germany, because Germany, I think, officially ruled recently that Tesla wasn't allowed to call their self-driving an autopilot, because Germany decided that it didn't meet the standards. So, if anything, I think the Americans have like the freedom, like we want the freedom to do what we want, kind of thing, whereas the Germans are very much about the rules. And in this case, I thought they were kind of off the ball, or like not correct, because it's the closest thing that we have to full self-driving or autonomous driving. No other company is even as close as Tesla. But I think there are still incidences where the cars do have accidents where if you were paying attention, you would have survived. So there's a few instances where the car can't tell the difference between like the sky and the road, and then the car that's parked on the service edge, and then you end up hitting it because the lane ends. So there's a lot of those kinds of accidents. Of course, normal cars have many, many more accidents, but just a few things to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's our legal system too. I mean, are we going to sustain a lawsuit stemming from accidents with self-driving cars, given our litigious society? It's going to take years.
Well, the numbers and data supporting the driverless car safety is much higher than people driving.
But our crazy courts might see things differently. So people are going to be suing endlessly in the U.S. over this for decades.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be the people. I think it'd be the insurance companies. It's more of an insurance problem than it is even a technical problem. I think technically, yeah, it's going to happen if it's not already happening to a high extent where there's a lot of high confidence in the driving ability. But I think the insurance companies will have a lot of poignant legal arguments for why the self-driving system isn't necessarily as responsible as it could be. It's basically like a stupid cockroach right now, but a stupid cockroach is still quite hard to kill in the middle of the night when you're in your kitchen, kind of thing. So,
okay, should we go to the next one? Next one says, Bloomberg says they have sources that Twitter's new CEO, Parag Agrawal, was Jack Dorsey's only serious candidate to replace him as Twitter CEO, and that Elliott Management, which was rumored to be the reason that Jack left, that they had kicked him out, in fact, did not demand that Jack Dorsey resign. So there were understandably all kinds of rumors when Jack announced his departure a week or so ago. And one of those rumors was that he was forced out by this kind of activist investor called Elliott. And now the report is saying that Elliott didn't force him out, and that he had known for more than a year. And he had even told Parag a year ago of what was going to happen. And this adds credence to our take here at Tech News that Jack knew this was going to happen a while ago, and that this was in the plans and in the works for a while, conceptually, although the final decision might have happened quickly in terms of executing the departure, but that the departure was kind of not a big surprise in the bigger picture because of the bigger moves that Jack's making in the back. And yeah, we didn't think he was forced out. That didn't seem realistic to us. And yeah, that it is.
There's also a saying that he's pretty confident that he'll be able to do a good job.
Okay, and then there was some tech journalists who were saying Jack's stepping down because he's tired of working at a big tech company or something. It's like, again, this basically doesn't help support that claim. But it's I'm sure we'll get, eventually he'll do an interview and we'll get the the real truth of the matter. And then the next article is a report details the supply chain issues that forced Apple to significantly scale down its iPhone and iPad production plans. I don't know how interesting that is. Do we care about precisely why Apple was forced to scale down iPhone and iPad supply? I'm sure it's chips related. I mean, let's go ahead and open it just for our own intellectual curiosity. Today's report indicates that Apple missed targets for the iPhone 13 production in September and October by 20%. Additionally, Apple has reportedly been forced to scale back its total iPhone 13 production goal. But the shortages are not only affecting Apple's latest and greatest iPhone 13 lineup. The report explains that the production forecast for older generations of iPhones also dropped. As such, Apple is also about 15 million units short of its goal. Nikkei says that Apple actually halted iPhone and iPad assembly for several days in October, seeing that hasn't been done in over a decade. For the first time in a decade, iPhone and iPad assembly was halted for several days due to supply chain constraints and restrictions on the use of power in China. There you go. Now we know. And we read those headlines when the power was down in China. Due to limited components and chips, it made no sense to work overtime on holidays and give extra pay for frontline workers. Okay, so it's a combination of chips and the big power outages they were having across China a month or so ago. Yep, makes sense. So next one from Wall Street Journal. As U.S. companies fight to attract workers in a tight labor market, Amazon has emerged as the de facto wage and benefit setter, causing ripples across the economy. From the Wall Street Journal. Let's have a look. It says, in local markets throughout America, the e-commerce giant's facilities have an impact on inflation, job markets, and labor standards. About 2 years ago, Amazon employees rigged a vehicle to carry a makeshift billboard advertising starting pay at roughly $16 an hour. They drove the truck all over the small Texas city where Mr. Ramirez helps run a rival warehouse operation. Within a few months, a handful of the employees and his company, mattress manufacturer named Serta, had decamped to Amazon. We had no choice but to compete, he said. The company raised its starting pay by roughly $2 to about $15 an hour and has since raised it about another dollar. As companies across America fight to find workers, Amazon is emerging as the de facto wage and benefit setter for a large pool of low-skilled workers. Business experts have long researched what is known as the Amazon effect in distributing traditional retailers. Now Amazon's every move is causing ripple effects well beyond the retail space in local markets throughout America, including on inflation, regional job markets, and labor standards, according to an examination of federal labor data and interviews with economists, researchers, local employment officials, and current and former Amazon employees. The nation's second largest private employer, first being Walmart, second being Amazon, is planning mock fulfillment centers in high schools to plant the seeds of future careers. Oh shit, that's crazy. They're planning mock fulfillment centers in high schools? Oh, wow. Here, you want to take Amazon Ec 101 next quarter? Hey, Bobby, what are you taking after science? I'm taking Amazon Fulfillment Center. Wow. Hey, Charlie, it looks like you're not doing so good at math. Maybe you should take the Amazon Fulfillment Center class next quarter.
We used to have a shop.
So exactly right.
Like welding and
Wow. But the crazy thing is that they're mock fulfillment centers. Why not make them real fulfillment centers and let the kids make a couple bucks? You know what I'm saying? What's the legal working age? You got some 18-year-olds there in high school. You get some.
They're probably mock because they're designing them for the future. Because remember, it's going to be half robotics.
Crazy. The effect is magnified because it says mock fulfillment centers in high schools to plant the seeds of future careers, sending recruiters to local fairgrounds and bombarding job boards with promises of large sign-on bonuses and pay, in some cases nearly triple the federal minimum wage. Those bad people at Amazon. The effect is magnified because Amazon churns through hundreds of thousands of employees each year, creating an even more voracious appetite for labor that often compels the company to push up compensation or improve recruitment in other ways, especially during peak times such as holiday shopping period now underway. Quote, Amazon has the economics of scale, says a workforce development official in Harrisburg, PA, an area of the country where Amazon is competing heavily with other large logistics and warehouse companies. Quote, they are influencing the market because of scale and name recognition, and they can afford to pay more than smaller guys. Oh, now they're paying too much. Oh, right. I'm pretty sure it was...
Tyler, this is similar to a lot of sectors where private sector is leading over government in setting standards. If the minimum wage was livable, or reasonable for what people are doing, then maybe Amazon wouldn't have this edge. I mean, admittedly, they have the profits, but they're going to be setting it. The Amazon world. And the other one is, if you look at the wording in this article, this is another big issue with reporting, is what words they use. So churn and voracious are spinning it in a certain direction,
Totally.
right? Right. So go on.
I'm with you.
Is it better that they are raising the bottom line price for workers?
Well, historically, they've just been taking a whole lot of heat for not paying enough, and now they're getting heat for paying too much.
Yeah. Again, the reporting.
Okay, so next one. This time of year, Amazon actually does need a ton of people because they're facing the unions are intentionally trying to do, what do we call it? Walkouts during the holiday rush, because that's when these walkouts would be most effective from a negotiation standpoint. And it's potentially Amazon is intentionally seeding a story like this to the Wall Street Journal to get out the message that Amazon pays quite well during this time of year. And there's a whole bunch of people who might want to, after reading this, might feel inspired to go apply down at the local Amazon fulfillment center.
Yeah, but Tyler, I doubt they seeded the story, because look at the language. The Wall Street Journal picked it up, but they definitely are seeding the pay raise. I mean, they're definitely putting that out now, right?
I'm sure as Amazon doesn't mind this story, that they're being painted as paying too much. Reddit launches a Spotify Wrapped inspired annual usage statistic for users. They're not the only ones. I've seen a bunch of these from startups are now copying the Spotify annual end of year wrap style annual usage statistics for users, including time spent on popular content. And so now Reddit and eventually everybody's going to copy this thing because it's a lot of remarketing. Next up, French financial super app Lydia raises $100 million at a $1 billion valuation. So France got a unicorn. So what's the score? Let's check the scoreboard. It's India 52 to France 3 this year. Well done, France. Got another unicorn there. And India says, yeah, that's called Wednesday over here in Bangalore. So the next one's from TechCrunch, that Tipalti, which offers cloud-based accounting services, raises $270 million at an $8.3 billion valuation. No idea where they're from. I've never heard of it, to be honest. And Amazon launches something called AWS Top Secret West, its second top secret region, designed for government workloads requiring top secret U.S. security classification.
You have to have Cheryl do it.
Cheryl, can you?
Cheryl's got to do it.
It's Cheryl asleep because she's not updating the articles either.
Oh, Cheryl Nemwe. Oh, you know what? No. She fell off the stage. There you go.
That's better.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay. The erotic ghost known as Cheryl and whispering in the background. So Amazon top secret for government top secret cloud storage. Very interesting. U.S. New York Times is reporting the story we read 48 hours ago. U.S. airports are increasingly using biometrics like facial recognition to verify identities. Did I not say this was coming? Have I not been saying this is coming for a very long time?
Yes, said it like last week.
Your face is or will be your boarding pass. Yeah, we read this before. Tech-driven changes are coming fast and furious to airports, including advancements in biometrics that verify identity and shorten security procedures for those passengers who opt into the programs. And if it's been a year or more since you traveled, particularly internationally, you may notice something different at airports. In the US, more steps from checking a bag to clearing customs are being automated using biometrics. Biometrics are unique individual traits, such as fingerprints, that can be used to automate and verify identity. They promise both more security and efficiency in moving travelers through an airport, where at steps from check-in to boarding, passengers are normally required to show government-issued photo identification. In the travel hiatus caused by the pandemic, many airports, airlines, tech companies, and government agencies like the TSA and the U.S. Border Patrol continue to invest in biometric technologies. The need for social distancing and contactless interactions only added to the urgency. Quote, the technologies have gotten much more sophisticated and the accuracy rate much higher, says Robert Tappan, the managing director for the trade group called International Biometrics and Identity Association. Well, of course he's going to say that. He represents all of those companies. Who called the impetus to ease crowds and reduce contact through the instruments COVID accelerated. Many of the latest biometric developments use facial recognition, which the National Institute of Standards and Technology recently found is at least 99.5% accurate rather than iris scanning or fingerprints. Quote, iris scanning has been touted as the most foolproof, said the head of technology in the Americas for CETA, a Switzerland-based biometrics tech company. For biometrics to work, you have to be able to match to a known trusted source of data because you're trying to compare it to a record on file. The face is the easiest because all of the documents we use that prove your identity, like your driver's license and your passport, rely on your face. Get it? You see? You get it? You understand now? Because you can't get your iris off of your driver's license or your passport. Shortly after 9/11, Congress mandated an entry and exit system using biometric technology to secure U.S. borders. Some travelers have expressed concerns about privacy. That's going to be the word of 2022, right there. Some travelers, some Spotify users, some protesters,
Some artists.
yes, it's just, which is basically, this is the new lazy journalism where when they want to make a point, can just mention. By the way, the person who pioneered and popularized, and I would even dare say mastered this tactic and technique, is Mr. Donald Trump. When some people are talking, some people tell me that Joe Biden's an idiot, and people are telling me this and that, and people told me this and this and this, and well, who are these random people, right? Well, New York Times is now doing exactly what Donald Trump did by saying some travelers are expressing concern. Oh, really? Sure they are. So
facial recognition is at the Singapore customs.
Say again, Cheryl.
Is now the default for Singaporeans crossing the Singapore customs.
It's now the default to use facial recognition in Singapore at the airports, yeah? Okay.
That's right.
And hey, if you can get facial recognition working on 2 billion Asian people, and because Americans, hello, as somebody who's lived in Asia most of their life, for some weird reason, people in America think Asians look alike. Well, if true, then facial recognition would struggle with these people that you think look alike, wouldn't it? Well, it turns out they don't. It works rather well throughout Asia. So factor that one in. For biometrics to work, you have to be able to match a known trusted source. That's why we use face, and privacy is a major concern, as it should be. So most of these programs are going to be opt-in, and the government is trying to grow that pre-vetted audience, said the vice president of aviation, blah, blah, blah. There are signs that the pandemic may be advancing biometric acceptance. We already know this. This is not... Hey, New York Times, let me clue you in. This is booming everywhere. Huge. Massively. We understand you don't travel much outside of the U.S. We all do. And this is, as Cheryl just said, it's a default for everyone traveling in Asia for a while now. Thailand is actually using face and fingerprints on both hands, all your fingerprints on both of your hands, and your face as well. And has been doing that. It's been doing your face for a very long time, and it's been doing the fingerprints for about a year now. So,
Taylor?
yes.
I think there was just, there is some also unclearness, I would say, trying to put it politely, not being able to have a good system for people of color. So it has been in many different cases, not the boarding, but many cases, there has been misidentification, especially in police stations where they have been trying to use it for, identifying some criminal activities. So there has been quite few how do I say, misidentifying a person. So I think there is some already for people of color. It seems to be good for, a Caucasian, but I think we need to be careful. I don't know. So that's my concern.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. I think this year Apple famously talked about, better low light conditions. I think it's just by the nature of the tone, the sensors have a harder time picking that up. That's not an excuse. Companies should have done this long ago. But I think that's a great point where this new technology is accidentally, whether we like it or not, going to effectively be racist and it's going to target a bunch of people who shouldn't have been targeted. So I think by adding perhaps extra layers of security, like maybe blood flow in the face, which you can get with various sensors, we might be able to get better detections, but just using normal visible spectrum cameras, I don't think that's sufficient, and that just is an injustice to people of color.
Okay. So the next one is that Ubisoft, which is a massive game conglomerate, will add NFT items into its games, starting with a AAA title called Ghost Recon Breakpoint. And these NFTs will be on the Tezos blockchain, becoming the first major gaming company to put NFTs in a AAA game. Major game publisher Ubisoft will implement in-game NFTs into its game, starting with Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. And the crypto world, especially the NFT world, is very happy about the news. And this is a very cool element to gameplay where you can now, if you buy a virtual item in a game, you can resell it at a profit, potentially. And this whole economy inside of games is what has the whole gaming world incredibly excited, as people can now make money from playing games.
And this actually started a few years ago with Valve and their boxes and crates in, I think, a game called Team Fortress 2. And people didn't think of it as anything serious. And to see the evolution since then is quite amazing that we've actually found a way to make things that are non-permanent or digital have some value that isn't fleeting.
Yeah, the limited quantity element, but there's also the interoperability element where Ubisoft, no doubt, they're going to announce another title soon that will also use this same NFT items on the same blockchain. And then that gets very, very interesting, because then you could have a weapon or shoes or what have you in one game and transfer them to another because you own them. That becomes even more interesting when we start talking about VR games, where your favorite gun that you earned in one game is movable into other games and what have you.
We have a professional gamer on the channel, Emma. I pinged her, but let's see if she joins here. But this with trading unique items in games has been a thing for several years. She actually has a couple of badges and pieces of equipment that are unique that people are trying to purchase from her for tens of thousands of kronas. That's equals a couple of thousands of dollars. You
Yeah, that's a really old concept. Several games have those rare, unique things that you can build over time or acquire and then sell for points or certain other benefits. I mean, very old concept, but yeah, NFT is getting associated with the gaming. So directly you will get the payment in cryptocurrency. That's new.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Next one is a look at the proliferation of dark stores. Many warehouses in urban retail spaces used by fast grocery delivery companies and their impact on community life. This is huge. This is one of the biggest issues. This sounds like a boring headline. I assure you it's not. This is one of the most important developments in how tech is impacting society in huge ways that people don't yet realize. And this was my major in university, so I wouldn't consider myself an absolute expert on the subject, but I certainly know a lot about it. So the headline says many warehouses, being called dark stores, are quietly taking over urban retail space. And left unregulated, the insatiable demand for faster delivery will only hasten the erosion of community life. And now you're starting to see shades of how impactful this can be. It's huge. It's going to be absolutely huge. It could very potentially wipe out the vast majority of all shops in your cities and replace them with rather windowless, fully automated robotic dark stores where robots zip around and pick out orders and toss them into other little robots that then drive to the person who ordered them. And that's incredibly efficient. And the key is there's no humans involved. And when there's no humans involved, the cost of the whole process gets cut in half. The cost of your order gets cut in half. The cost of your dinner and lunch and products that you're purchasing for delivery are cut in half when there's no humans involved. And more importantly, there's no real rent involved because they're not paying the high street prices. They're paying the cheap rent on the dark, ugly, urine-soaked warehouse on the edge of town. So the cost per square foot is a tenth of what it would be, or even a hundredth of what it would be, to buy it from the Starbucks that's right in the center of the heart of the town, with employees and all of that. And you remove all of those costs, and you have the Starbucks delivered. The cost to Starbucks will be way less to send it to you when the delivery is done without a human.
And well, it's like ghost kitchens, Tyler. They have a lot of that in the food delivery business already.
Yeah. So the kitchens were sort of the first movers in this space. And they're also the first movers in automating themselves with removing the chefs from the dark kitchens. And soon the delivery themselves will be automated. And then that's going to shift into the supermarkets will be robotic supermarkets. And then you'll have robotic all kinds of shops. Pretty much everything you want to order from home will be fully automated in the near future. So this article does a good job of outlining what that means, how that will impact society, just like how trains impacted societies in very interesting ways, and radio and movies and every technology we have. The really big technologies shape our cities in very, very interesting ways. And this is certainly one of those ways that could really change how cities operate fundamentally. When we think of resource frontiers, it calls to mind the rugged, glamorous classics, oil booms, gold rushes, or in the not-so-distant future, asteroid mining, but the latest is closer to home. Whether you live in Manhattan, Hollywood, or beyond, the storefronts and sidewalks in your city are becoming mined. Over the last year, cities across the US and Europe have seen the rapid rise of a number of dark stores, many warehouses stocked with groceries to be delivered in 15 minutes or less, operated by well-funded startups such as Getir, GoPuff, Joker, and Gorillas. Dark stores are quietly devouring retail spaces, transforming them into minimally staffed distribution centers closed to the public. In New York City, where 7 of these services are currently competing for market share, including new entry DoorDash, These companies have occupied dozens of storefronts since July, with expansion plans calling for hundreds more in Manhattan alone. With low or no delivery fees, the convenience is mind-bending. 15-minute delivery changes the way you shop. Customers first try us out because they forgot an ingredient, then they use us the next night for all their dinner ingredients. Soon enough, they never have to wear pants again. Laugh all you want, it's exactly this addictive convenience that threatens to transform downtowns into dark cities, where the everyday commerce that gives streets their vitality has evaporated from view and been reconstituted on an app. On the surface, the idea of 15-minute delivery has much in common with another model of urban convenience that has recently risen in popularity, the 15-minute city, where essential services are easily accessible on foot or by bike. Both visions bring goods and services closer to home. But while one harnesses consumption to seed and bolster community, a delivery-based world devours communities. Cities need to delineate the increasingly fuzzy boundary between stealth micro-fulfillment outposts and the traditional commerce of bodegas. If not, our post-pandemic urban future is less likely to be one where we're on a first-name basis with our neighborhood baker than one where the streets are filled with workers ferrying cilantro for impromptu tacos. In fact, given the ambitions of DoorDash and others to vertically integrate their operations, to stop delivering meals and groceries from local stores and start running their own, is a future where bodegas and restaurants are unequivocally in the crosshairs. The turbulence transforming retail is driven by familiar trends and turbocharged by venture capital. E-commerce and on-demand delivery undermine the need for brick-and-mortar retail, resulting in empty storefronts. In turn, surviving retailers adopt new tactics to lure shoppers, such as experiential retail and their own dispatch services. Through lockdowns and the safety concerns of COVID-19, the pandemic has only accelerated these trends. The demand for convenience is seemingly bottomless, but no city has yet found a way to balance the short-term benefit of personal convenience against the long-term cost of eroding community life through decreased social interaction. We've seen this before with the ride-hailing services, when VC-backed entrepreneurs arbitrage the urban realm at the expense of public transportation and traffic congestion. One can't blame customers for seeking convenience then and now, but public officials should be savvier this time. They need to think clearly and proactively about trade-offs, since the rise of dark stores will directly harm these aspects of urban life, sidewalk life, and congestion and equality. Sidewalk life.
I can't imagine creating a downtown like Detroit all over the nation. That would be horrendous. What would we refashion the spaces for?
And I was thinking about what if this extends to Saks and Neiman Marcus, and those holiday beautiful windows with lighting will be back.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
You're thinking about ghost town happening. We'll have to rethink and
Wow.
restructure design as a whole.
Peter,
Because the sense of holiday shopping is also uh, related to the experience of shopping with those beautiful, decorated spots on the. Oh, that's not gonna look good.
So
Thing
Peter,
is here that Gothenburg is a city that is, we don't have any dark shops. We only have cardboarded over shops. Gothenburg, which is a quite small town compared to the other cities you guys live in, we are about 130,000 in total living around Gothenburg. But the whole city core is looks like it's been bombed. Their windows are whole, but they are cardboarded over all over. You can go street up and street down without finding more than not coffee shops, but the restaurants. That's all the things there is. Even the big ones, Kappahl, H&M, Hennes & Mauritz, giving up in Gothenburg. They have gone from 5 shops in center of Gothenburg to 1 in 2 years. So yeah, we see this very, very closely.
So Peter Pence, is it? Yeah. Just joined on stage in Twitter Spaces, and he has his hand raised very politely. Thank you, Peter. What's on your mind?
Well, a very good evening from Cape Town, South Africa. Great being in this tech news around the world space, and thank you so much for having me. I am a communications manager on a family wine farm, and very interesting to see how in South Africa we really digitized online shopping in very sense that, obviously COVID happened. And I said to someone, COVID made our citizens go online. Pre-COVID, South Africans were very, very hesitant to do online shopping. Big reason for that, mainly because data and internet connection in South Africa is very expensive in relation to the rest of the world. So we've got slow internet, bad internet, and then obviously we are very afraid of cyber security issues, right? Sharing our banking details. But COVID came and people were forced to buy wine online. Our online shop just exploded with orders, and people realized how easy it is to get their favorite wine from anywhere in South Africa. They can order the wine gets delivered to their doorstep. Now, that really changed perception in South Africa, citizens wise, in the sense that all of a sudden people realized it is easy, it's convenient. And then retailers like let's say, our Massmart or Target shops called Checkers, they introduced, a 60/60 app. You can buy anything and they deliver it to you in 60 minutes. It's like a DoorDash type of thing. And all of the shops really just came on board with it. So much so that the roads are filled with motorbikes, scooters, as we call them, people delivering goods to people. And that's really amazing to see how technology started evolving and living, let's say, how technology started living in South Africa. It's amazing. My granddad lives 2 hours away from us, and I live in a farm, but I can sit on a freaking tractor in South Africa and order something for my granddad as a surprise, and it gets delivered to his door. These things have been norm in the US for so long, but all of a sudden it's so nice to be part of that. You understand, for someone South Africa to be part of that instant gratification. I always talk about the instant gratification. I can order something, get it now. Things are moving faster and easier, and I'm really excited with AR and AI being developed for the future of technology in retail. This is going to be huge. I don't think we are prepared for what's to come.
Well, you got that right, because the VR shopping is really going to blow people's minds, because you're going to be able to say, there will be an app, no doubt, that says, what do you want to buy? And you say, I want to buy X, and it will show you 100 versions of X that you can then see in 3D and say, show me, rank them for me in price. And it's going to be kind of mind blowing. Besides the fact that in AR, you'll be able to walk down the street and click on anything in your vision and be able to order it and ship it in, 15 minutes. So any store that does still exist, like the shoe store example, if you walk in the shoe store and you're wearing AR glasses, like Facebook AR glasses or Apple's or anyone's, they're going to give you the option to see that they'll do the image recognition of that shoe in front of you and every shoe on the wall in front of you, and offer you prices that are 30% less than are in that shoe store.
And
Because
they've even considered people who are like tactile shoppers, right? With the haptic gloves, you can feel the product. The person can tell you what the product's like. You can imagine yourself in these outfits before purchasing, all from your home. This changes the dynamic of retail shopping as a whole.
Yeah,
yeah,
it gets better and better from the standpoint of convenience. And that's actually, if you look back over the long haul, and I have a longer haul than most of you, you can already
are you a long hauler?
see I am a long hauler, because you can already see what has changed in my lifetime. I ordered, in the beginning out of a paper Sears catalog.
I knew you were going
Now,
there. Yeah.
yeah. So now, not only isn't there a paper Sears catalog, there's no Sears. But I, I will say that in Hammersmith, where my daughter lived, they had a store for a very long time in which you came in and ordered out of a catalog in the store, and the store was basically just a showroom, and then they shipped it to you from somewhere else. So, it just depends on what rents were in your community, how fast it's forced to change. But from being the age that I am, I've come to conclude that you can't say, oh, this change is bad, this change is good. Change is just change. and it just happens.
So the next,
I see the
yeah,
point of convenience, but it does change the social interactions that people may have randomly when going to the store, talking to the salesperson, maybe going with your friends on that shopping experience. So that
Aram,
social
I
dynamic is being
understand that,
shifted. Yeah, that is just notable. I'm not saying
but
good or
I'm
bad.
happy. You
Mm.
know, I've reconfigured to where I'm getting the same excitement out of talking to you in tech news around the world. You know what I mean? So we have different. We're not going to give up social exchanges. We're social animals, but you adapt. So now I've met everybody online, and they're much more interesting than the people I used to run into in the store.
ooh, that's a good point because you
Yeah,
could,
yeah, interacting online, that's good. Yes, I love the interaction on this app, but I also enjoy the walk across that Macy's window, all, beautifully decorated with lights and the Christmas feel when you go through the downtown with all the decorated, beautiful. I mean, I just kind of like that.
Well,
You
I'm
know,
not
Aram, you make a
criticizing you.
great point in that what does that spell for our health, right? People are
Yes,
reluctant
the
to do
physical.
exercise as it is. When you make everything so convenient, what do we imagine health will be like for human beings moving forward?
Exactly. It kind of
I
allows me
I
to walk through
exercise
the
as much
downtown as
as
opposed to
always.
now. Sorry, Dr. Francine. I was making this point of physically going to a place, walking down the street, grabbing a cup of coffee, some chocolate, and then, you know, the physical activity plus with your friends, like making a it's like a traditional thing as well. And I understand the communication is happening online, but that physical movement and the joy of being outside, surrounded by the beautiful kind of decorated places, I mean, I kind of think that's a great way for a relaxation combined with shopping, which at home you don't get that experience.
In VR, you
I'm
will
going to
have a
argue
lot
this
more of the
once
gun.
more.
yeah, go ahead, Francine.
I'm going to argue this once more and say that um, for me, Macy's windows were like Instagram because I knew that I couldn't afford anything in them, and so they always made me feel crummy.
Oh wow.
And the only thing that Christmas made me feel um, was harried and harassed. And so, I'll take it the way it is now.
Hmm, that's such an interesting point.
Yeah, Macy's and Saks, and I grew up in New York City, and all those stores, they were like my version of Instagram. They made me feel fat and poor.
Hmm, I
That's a
wonder
great point.
how the metaverse might. I imagine that's such a weird concept in a metaverse context. Hmm.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to be in a metaverse where I don't feel that way, or I'm not going.
Right. Yeah, I think people will be able to tailor their experience, but this whole point of NFTs is to try and demonstrate status of exclusivity, and we attach exclusivity to value and value of owned objects to value of ourself and our ego value, and it's the NFTs are an extension of ego in a weird way, but they have technically no utility. I mean, you can't they have no actual physical usefulness in the digital space, where physical goods, as much as burka bags are incredibly overpriced for what they are, they actually do have physical utility at the end of the day. I mean, they're priced way beyond their physical utility, but nonetheless they have actual utility, and they're made out of incredibly high skilled hand labor and out of rare materials, or
Do
of
you
rare.
mean Birkin,
Huh?
Tyler?
What?
Birkin?
Yes.
Okay.
As just as the example. So it's like, will we envy digitally scarce objects which are artificially scarce?
So that mindset will translate into the digital space as well. Like a person who's feeling insecure by the beauty of a store can feel insecure in the virtual world as well. So that mindset translates it, but the problem is that the physical presence in that street when you're walking and having this experience is now shifted inwards. You're home by yourself, nobody else around you, if you know you're by yourself, and virtually you are present, your mind is there in the virtual world, but your body is not even getting any physical experience. So to me it doesn't jive well.
Hold on. So Francine, do you get any kind of Macy's window vibes from CryptoPunks, for example?
Yes, I actually do. You know, I feel like when I can't afford, you know, a Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT, I have those window vibes. So yes, I do have them. You know, our insecurities are our insecurities, and it doesn't matter if the thing has any real utility or not, because
Yeah.
many people believe that the dresses they sold in New York City had no utility if the person, you know, lived in Glen Falls, you know. So it's like it's all, this is all psychological, all of it.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like even saying you don't get outside, you know, I walk every hour in Phoenix outside in nature with the dogs. I get as much or more physical exercise as I ever got when I lived in New York, because the weather here is nicer. So physical exercise is not that difficult. The psychological effects of all these things are way more important, and the ability to adapt to change, I think, is going to be the most critical ability we all have to cultivate in ourselves and our children.
Absolutely. Could I add my little tuppence worth in here, please, Tyler?
Sure. Well,
I think Francine raises a very, very relevant point that you've also picked up, Tyler, is that what the VR world and all of that will have as unintended consequences relating to what we see, what we aspire to, what we as consumers hanker after, and therefore have, you know, psychological issues with. I think what Francine's saying about Fifth Avenue and all those beautiful lights and shops, I completely understand what Erin is saying too. It's looking at those windows and a little bit like the little boy in A Christmas Carol, you know, your eyes just twinkle and sparkle because it is so wonderful, and it is, but it does pull on that side of our human nature, or some people's human nature, that we want these things, and wanting and achieving all these consumer goods actually has negative sides, which we all recognize now in today's society. And that is probably one of the dangers that will continue to exist, whether on Instagram or in virtual reality or any of that. And it's quite dangerous. I suppose it's a little bit feeling a bit like a Grinch or a something like that, where I, at this stage in life, because I don't have any grandchildren, I think, why are all these lights up in my neighborhood? They are wasting so much electricity. They're creating so much light dispersion, whatever it is, in the beautiful countryside. We can't see the stars for the electric lights. And please, will you not turn the lights off, even if it's Christmas time? Call me a Grinch, call me whatever, but there we are.
okay. So the next topic is that the Joe Biden's pick to lead the OCC has her name was Omarova, who was a strong crypto critic, is now withdrawing her name from consideration following Senate fights over her background, um, where she was, I believe she's,
From Russia, I believe,
I
or
think she's
Ukraine.
Kazakh, from Kazakhstan, if I recall correctly. I'm almost certain she's Kazakh.
No, I think you are right. Yeah.
Yeah, and which was controlled by the Soviet Union, of course. So people think she's Russian. Technically, she's not Russian; she's Kazakh, but speaks with a Russian accent. Has a last name that people would mistake for being Russian, perhaps, and maybe it is actually. And but yeah, the people were making comments about calling her comrade and whatnot, and so she's withdrawn. And the next one is that researchers have discovered 27 vulnerabilities in a very popular software development kit used by numerous cloud providers, including Amazon Web Services, which is used. This is an incredibly popular tool that web developers use, these software development kits. And one very popular web software development kit has been found to have 27 vulnerabilities. And that's your daily reminder that your devices are completely Swiss cheese with regard to security. And
isn't that what you would call a vulnerability suite?
yeah, software SDK vulnerability development kit, the VDK. A Blackstone, which is these massive, hedge fund, massive private equity, groups that are now doing a lot of investment in tech lately, and others are trying to shake up the $40 trillion global corporate bond market with computer-driven quant trading that already reshaped the stock market, which every day trader is familiar with, which is with how supercomputers placed as close as possible to the New York Stock Exchange trading floor. Literally, they would pay premiums to move these supercomputers and shorten the cable lengths as short as possible to do micro transaction trades. And it has had a really interesting influence on day trading and the stock market. And now they want to bring the same to the bond market, basically. Corporate credit has been largely untouched by computer-driven trading, but some investors are trying to change that, namely Blackstone. Next up, Newtonx, which connects companies.
Tyler, before you move on, can I just make a comment on that fixed income thing, the bond, because obviously that's my area.
Yeah.
The thing that I would be concerned about with that is with fixed income, you only really can make a lot of money even when you're dealing with really small decimal points by using a lot of leverage. So if they end up doing it like better with computers, they're still probably going to use a lot of leverage. And I should point out that long-term capital management maybe not using as sophisticated as computers 20 years ago whenever they blew up, but still using computers and still using a lot of things trying to play very small edges. That can get very dangerous systematically with fixed income, with bonds. Okay, thanks.
Alrighty, thank you for that.
But I would add to that in general, high frequency trading has a way of stabilizing the market, unlike the usual way of trading, which is either like a cabal-like form where you have very special interests kind of balancing the market. We saw this a few years ago where aluminum was just driven around between cities and so on. So personally, I think high frequency trading is a different approach to cost versus price, and the more quickly you trade it, the more quickly you can come to realize what its true value is. It's very counterintuitive, but I think it's a welcome change compared to the fear-based kind of trading that we normally engage in.
So the next one is a company called Newtonx, which connects companies with subject matter experts, raises $32 million, and Equinix acquires West African data center company Main One for $320 million. Security-focused IoT service Affero raises $50 million. Bloomberg has done research that shows African startups will raise $5 billion in 2021, more than the past 3 years combined, creating 4 unicorns, including Andela, Flutterwave, and OPay. I know Flutterwave and OPay are fintechs, and I know Flutterwave was Nigerian. So next.
Cheaper Cash was the latest one as well. Andela is the just about a couple of months ago, but I think Africans debate that it's probably is not fully African company because it's headquartered in New York, but it's also in Nigeria. But yeah, those are
Same with
the
OPay.
unicorns that happen. Yeah. OPay actually is fully Chinese. It didn't even have any African actually. That's even worse.
Yeah,
At least with Andela, at the beginning there was three Africans and then three non-Africans. They started that way, but then somehow the Africans kind of left the company, and even the business model was changing. So it didn't really have that much in Africa. But OPay is fully Chinese. It was funded by Chinese. It was founded by Chinese. It just works in African market. Even to top it off, they were a bit in trouble in India. They were expanding in India, and they were being investigated for money laundering or something like that. So yeah, but that doesn't really take away the most of the unicorns that happened in 2021, where African economy was really feared to collapse because of COVID and things like that. Instead, the fintech just is accelerating. So like you said, Flutter Wave is in Nigeria, and then I think there was Egyptian as well, the transport ride share that became unicorn in August, I think. But yeah, it has been doing really great, and it's expected to at least double next year.
Okay, New York Times says that Facebook, Nike, General Motors, IBM, Walmart, and others join the Data and Trust Alliance, which has developed an anti-bias scoring system to analyze AI usage during hiring. Okay. And a company called Cerebral, which provides app-based counseling, medication, and mental health services, raises $300 million by SoftBank. eSol, which offers event management tools, raises $25 million to Tiger Group Global. The FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration, outlines flight restrictions, including restricting bad weather automated landing systems to avoid interference with C-band 5G spectrum. Now we found the real problem with 5G is it apparently messes the C-band, which is two of the three major carriers in the U.S. apparently are having a bit of problems with 5G towers near airports. And a company called
but Tyler, look at the choice we just made. Let's assume, because there's some debate, thank you, about whether the 5G actually interferes. I mean, that's what. Okay, but let's assume it does, and the FAA is right. They're telling the pilots to turn off certain equipment. Okay, and so now they're going to have to land almost kind of maybe like they did it 20, 30 years ago. I mean, you're not going to have some of the automated systems to help you land in bad conditions, and we're making that choice to favor people being able to use 5G. I mean, so we're trading safety on planes for for data speeds on mobile phones, and I think that's a terrible public policy choice if that's the choice that's being made. But I just wanted to put that in some perspective.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. And what else do we got? Indonesian startup Flip, which aims to streamline interbank money transfers, raises $48 million. Australian startup Finder, which helps clients invest and save money, raises $20 million. As Indian IT firm Infosys ramps up hiring of U.S. workers, some are paid to do nothing for an extended period of time while they wait for a project assignment. Who's interested? Count me in for that. And Samsung partnered with Microsoft this summer on HoloLens project slated for launch in 2024. Samsung likely to be the hardware manufacturer. That's kind of juicy. And Facebook's Messenger chief, who is also leading the integration of Facebook's messaging services, will leave the company in Q2. And
that's old news, Tyler. We covered that like what, a week or two ago, right? I mean, that's old news that he's leaving.
I don't think it was.
Yeah,
I
you
think,
said that
yeah,
a week ago or so.
Oh,
You spoke about
yeah,
the
that's old
messenger guy
news.
leaving, and it was a very very short notice. That's what I reckon.
okay. So now, who was? I think you're thinking about the guy David Marcus, who used to do. He was the real pioneer of Messenger, and then he was doing the Novi wallet for Facebook. He just announced he's resigning by the end of the year.
It's another guy. Sorry for that.
Yeah, that's David. David Marcus is a huge player. He's like the third most important person in Facebook under Mark and Carol.
Okay.
So, so
Tyler,
yes,
do you think that maybe this, the CFO resigned after, the leak happened and then no other resignation happened, right? But now few are resigning. Is that maybe a planned way to do it so that they wouldn't, cause a lot of
right.
problems if they did it all together?
I think well, they would do. First of all, of course, the company would prefer that. Of course, the team members themselves would be fine with that if they're friendly with the company, and especially if they have some kind of severance package or something like that, and they don't want to make enemies of Mark Zuckerberg. So I do imagine that there was, remember when I said at the beginning of the Facebook files that the biggest consequence of it will probably be that people won't hold their head as high. And I gave the example of when I used to go for Sunday brunch in Cupertino, which Cupertino's a lot of fantastic Chinese restaurants. And, I'd have my girlfriend at the time worked at Intel, and all of her best friends she went to high school with, all, work at Apple and Facebook and Google and all that. And we would meet every weekend for Sunday brunch, and have dim sum or whatever, right? And it would be interesting to see how much that these employers played a role in their own self-identity, because I was at a very small startup at the time, and it had a different power dynamic. And at that time, and this was 10 years ago, when Facebook was still very hot and still growing very fast, and it was interesting to see how people who worked at Facebook were very proud of the fact they worked at Facebook. And the point I was making was that these Facebook files, that are, whether or not they're right or wrong, and I'm making a lot of the, I'm in a position to defend them a lot of the time, because I feel like they're being not totally fairly charged with a lot of these headlines that we're reading. But regardless, whether they're right or wrong, it's going to cause a lot, and I said this would happen, that you're going to have people who are no longer as proud to work there, and it's going to cause them to reevaluate themselves, because they identify themselves with this previously very powerful company that they were very proud to work for, that they might not feel so proud about, because now when they go to brunch and people say, oh, where do you, and they're introducing themselves and where do you work, and now they're not as proud as they once were. And that has a tremendous interesting effect on the psychology of the organization. And we saw this with Microsoft in the late 90s and 2000s, where there was obviously a tipping point where the post monopoly Microsoft people weren't quite as proud as they once were, and that they went through this interesting period. So I think that's what's happening, and so it's not a surprise. I think there's, of course, we're hearing about the very high-profile people who are stepping down, but I think what's more interesting would be to find out how many of the non-high-profile people might be stepping down, or looking for other opportunities, because tech at this time, and in all fairness, I have to address the other side of this coin, which is we are absolutely in unprecedented times. I honestly believe David Marcus, the high-profile person who was really the leader behind Facebook Messenger, and one of the most powerful people at Facebook, probably the third most powerful in many people's minds, we are in a moment in Facebook. We are in a moment in tech where there's more money than there has ever been and probably ever will be to go do new projects. And there's whole new categories of innovation with the metaverse and with NFTs and fintech or Web3 and DeFi and, and computer brain interfaces and rapid delivery and automation and on and on and on. There's just, it's never been a better time to be a problem solver, innovator, entrepreneur in terms of all of these new platforms and the incredible amount of money. And what it's doing is, it used to be when you had a bright idea and a good pitch deck and a good co-founder, you would go out and you would raise, maybe $500,000 to $1 million at a $5 million valuation, which is what Uber did when Uber raised their first round. And my friend Jason, who's brought me into Clubhouse, you can see in my profile, invested in Uber on their very first pitch at a $5 million valuation. Today, startups are going around pitching at a $100 million valuation. If Uber were to launch today, if Travis Kalanick started a new startup with the same amount of credibility that he had then, which that was 2008, I recall. If you were to do it today in 2021, he would be pitching it at either somewhere between a 50 million and 100 million valuation, which is a 10x increase, which means you can get 10 times more money now than you could then, to kind of oversimplify it. So this is just unprecedented. This is truly, truly unprecedented. There's so much crazy money flooding into tech that it's a very unique opportunity for people in 2021 to do tech. So, now I want to
Hey, Tyler, you're spot on about David Marcus. He sent a couple weeks ago out a personal message via Messenger that he was ready to tackle some new challenges in his life and opportunities. So you're spot on. I think that's what we'll see more of.
I don't doubt that for 1 second. You're almost crazy at this moment in 2021. If you're working at a big tech company, rather than going out and trying a startup, you're making the good salary. That's cool. But this is the entrepreneur's moment to shine with all this money, splashing around. So the next article is a real doozy. It's from Axios. I'm going to pin it to the top of Clubhouse. I hope Cheryl, are you still with us, Cheryl? Hiding in the bathroom, Cheryl.
No, she's not here.
So you can. Oh, we woke the demon.
Get the stick in the priest, quick!
Brilliant. Get the garlic.
So the article I just pinned to the top of the Clubhouse room says, it's from Axios, that they have a scoop over there at Axios that over 200 newspapers are quietly suing big tech. Who do we imagine they're suing, by the way? Anyone have a guess? Anyone want to guess who the newspapers are suing?
Just a Facebook.
Just a hint.
Facebook.
Well, if
Facebook, Google.
You may have had the pleasure and distinct privilege of hearing me rant about how all of the newspapers have lost all their money to Facebook and Google, and that's why they're writing all of these hit pieces about, namely Facebook. And sure enough, here's the headline. Newspapers all over the country, more than 200, have been quietly filing antitrust lawsuits against Google and Facebook for the past year, alleging that the two firms monopolized the digital ad market for revenue that would otherwise go to local news. I rest my case, Your Honor. I rest my case. Have I not been saying?
And there you have it.
And there it is. Thank you very much. My name's Tyler. It's been fun, everybody. And I've been ranting like a lunatic for many months of explaining why news is going berserk, bananas, illogical, out of their mind, pulling the hair out of their physical heads, writing the most insane narrative craft bullshit about Facebook, calling it every bad name you can possibly imagine, literally diving in their dumpsters, looking for used yogurt wrappers to try and find anything they can about Facebook and how it's harming children. And no less than Instagram CEO is in front of the Senate today, right now, as we speak here. Instagram's CEO, part of Facebook, is testifying before the Senate because the Wall Street Journal lied and said, we found evidence that, Frances Haugen, who used to work at Facebook, not Instagram, leaked documents to the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal saw those documents. Rather than share those documents they found, they constructed an article based on one of the data points on one of the documents they found, claiming that Facebook knowingly is hurting young women, which is not at all true. And that's why he was called to testify today. And they're absolutely wasting his time. And they created this narrative that Instagram is knowingly hurting young women, young girls, more appropriately. And they didn't want to show you the actual document where they got that data point from. And they can't, because if they did, they couldn't write that article, because any logical person would say, wait a minute, your headline says what you want it to say. They're creating this massive narrative that Instagram is knowingly hurting young girls, but the document that you got that quote from disproves that quote, which is why they didn't share the document when they created that headline. And it took Facebook a week, but they did finally come out, and Facebook said, oh, are you talking about this document? Is this the document you're talking about? Because when you look at the document and you actually read it, you understand that your headline is a bunch of garbage. So now Adam Mosseri has to testify before the Senate to explain to the senators exactly what we figured out when we read Facebook's rebuttal, which was very brilliantly stated. My point is, the Wall Street Journal is not alone. There was dozens of publications who united with the Wall Street Journal in doing this massive dumpster dive in all of these files that Frances Haugen stole out of Facebook, which amounted to nothing. Frances Haugen had very unique access at Facebook to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of documents. Facebook is very unique in that they let all of the tens of thousands, somewhere 60,000 employees, have access to search all the files of all their coworkers. It's a very incredibly uniquely open and transparent company that lets everybody share all this shit together. And so she was able to get files from companies she does not work at, like Instagram, and then leaked to the Wall Street Journal. And then the Wall Street Journal intentionally cherry-picked and distorted to do some narrative, very creative writing and narrative craft that they knew was an intentional fabrication. So Facebook eventually responded, retorted, and we saw the real truth of what's really going on that issue, and it's a nothing burger. And then they continued on an endless rant of totally pointless, meaningless articles they continued to use to try and damage the reputation of Facebook. And that whole time they're doing this, never once conceding that they economically compete with Facebook. And in fact, all of the newspapers are economically competing with Facebook and tragically losing, absolutely getting slaughtered, just utterly gutted, decimated. And they are incredibly viciously vindictive against Facebook and Google. And this proves it. And now this headline, hello, thank you, finally proves what I've been saying. Not only do they hate Facebook and Google, they're trying to sue them. And they're trying to sue them because they're so effectively extracting the ad revenue to them that used to go to the newspapers. Newspapers used to be, in magazines, where the advertising dollars went. If you wanted to get eyeballs, you used to run an ad in the newspaper. But, back in the good old days, when people rode horses and shit. Right. Well, no one's doing that anymore. They're putting that money to Facebook because Facebook has a far better mousetrap that it lets you target the people you want to advertise very directly, much more efficiently. So you only need to pay a few pennies per person who's actually going to be interested in what you're selling, rather than the newspaper where you have no idea who's actually seeing it. So,
Tyler?
Yes?
To be fair,
Okay.
Facebook and especially even Google, they do aggregate news that they don't spend any money trying to write the article.
But that's not
So
what the
what they are
lawsuit's about.
doing, yeah, but I'm just saying what you are saying. What you are saying is yes, they are getting the ad because I personally find it easier to go to Google News because they will aggregate it and then
Right.
I'll pick and choose what I want.
But
And then, but they sell me their ad and make revenue on the articles that these people actually do the hard work and write the articles. So it's not really fair, especially the way you are
Methy,
defending it.
we got to stay focused because the issue is that these 200 newspapers are doing, they're suing Facebook and Google, not about that. They're suing them about having monopolized all of the digital ad market for revenue that would otherwise go to the local news. So they've lost all their revenue to Facebook and Google, and now they're angry. And they're angry is because they're saying, well, now there's only two companies who have 95% of all ad revenues going to Facebook and Google, and this is unfair. And is it really? I mean, you guys are staying with this horse and buggy model when you are watching the money go to Facebook because they have a far better mousetrap. You had the opportunity to innovate or stay, and you're basically a milk salesman in the era, or you're an ice salesman in the era, post refrigerators. People
This is
don't need
like
to.
two
I
children fighting, and
understand.
then one goes, "Look, mom, make him stop being great so that I can catch up." You just can't do that in business.
I
But
Well,
understand what
more
you are
importantly,
saying.
why is this issue is never addressed and never conceded, and they're never transparent when they write these absolutely creative fantasy hit pieces against Facebook?
And,
Somebody,
and Tyler, the other thing with antitrust, antitrust was developed to protect consumers, not to protect other businesses, really. So someone's going to have to make an argument if they're going to try to make an antitrust case on this, is how have consumers been hurt, even if in fact there is a monopoly on digital advertising, how has it hurt consumers? Because I think the digital companies are going to come back and say, this is better for society. We could better target ads.
That's
You
right.
get to choose what kind of ads you want to see. You don't want to see ads for certain things. The digital marketing will let you opt out of certain things. Okay, so I mean that's the problem with an antitrust case here, and that's actually, quite frankly, what's going on now in the 21st century is very different than what went on in the early 1900s. You have these monopolies like an Amazon, but the consumer's getting better prices. Okay, so it's not like the monopolies back 150, 200 years ago, where there was concern that even if it was a pass through, like on railroads, that ultimately consumer prices would go up if one company or two companies dominated oil or dominated railroads. The monopolies today don't seem to be negatively impacting consumers generally. So they're negatively impacting small business. And I'm not saying that's not a legitimate issue if people want to talk about it, but antitrust really was not designed for that. It was designed to kind of protect the end consumer.
It would be interesting to see if they could somehow weave disinformation into this, because that is a way that consumers and everybody has been harmed by what has happened to news.
Anywho, it'll be very interesting to see how the court rules in this case. And they are incredibly dominant, and it is statistically true that these two companies have 95% of the digital ad market, and that newspapers have lost tremendously by that. But
And I was just going to add that I just want to clarify something regarding the
first, Michelle,
impression
let me
serving.
introduce you as somebody who works at Facebook. Go ahead.
Well, you don't have to, but I was just
I
going to
feel
say
I want
that
them to know so that they understand the context of your comment.
no, that those two platforms do not directly serve ads on publishers' website. So let's say Google wouldn't be allowed to serve ads without the publishers plugging their impression serving device. So and they don't monetize within the Google News feed. So I think it's more where people tend to spend their time and where the eyeball is today. And so yeah, they control their own monetization on their website. So I just want to clarify that the problem here is where people spend time. And The other thing is also the fact that before, when they created Facebook pages, you could have 100% reach based on people following you. And then the traffic was a lot bigger than it is today. Now that it's barely 3% of your followers seeing what you post as a page, even if you're a newspaper. So I think it boils down to where people go and how these two players drive that traffic and prioritize.
Tyler,
Marshall,
it's also
my question would be also, I mean, when these tech giants are really selling their ad, the ad buyers are usually considering the eyeballs, not necessarily that when I'm reading a news in Google News or Facebook, not necessarily that I'm going to see a specific ad, but when I am ad buyer, even me, when I'm doing some ad buying for my own business, I usually consider the eyeball that comes in into the platform. So it basically is selling, the data that it has got. So it doesn't really matter if it comes to that specific page or not.
No, I think it's more everyone sees different ads, right? So if you go, for instance, to, I don't know, New York's Times, they will serve you ad based on their own data. So it's no one sells data because that you won't sell it because obviously it's not really sustainable. But it's more based on that person's behavior. You'll show what's relevant for them. They do have not the same capabilities, but they also have their own ad network internally. I think it's more a matter of there's less traffic on their website and the paywalls, and I think people just are more relying on headlines than really deep diving into every single article. Yeah, I don't know. I think it just also boils down consumers' behavior have drastically changed and people prefer videos and so on. So it's more complex than that.
So Facebook has not responded to the lawsuit yet. Google is said, quote, these claims are just wrong. The online advertising space is crowded and competitive, and our ad tech fees are lower than reported industry averages. So good luck getting them for monopoly, where the assumption is that they have, inflated prices because of their monopoly power. They have, and Google's correctly pointing out, we have below industry average fees. The publishers keep the vast majority of revenue earned when using our products. We are one of the world's leading financial supporters of journalism and have provided billions of dollars of support quality journalism in the digital age. And in fact, as Michelle, you can probably help fill in the blank here, but Facebook and Google both are major contributors financially to journalism. And no doubt they are doing that because they knew this day would inevitably come.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's just a paradigm changing that it probably takes time to get used to the new, the shift for those publishers.
Okay.
and Tyler, the one last quick point is I'm gonna be very curious to see what kind of remedy these newspapers are asking. So if you were to
I've got,
establish that they're a
I've got it
monopoly,
right here.
what? Oh, yeah.
I've had,
Okay,
it
go
says
ahead.
the goal of the goal of the litigation is, quote, to recover past damages to newspapers caused by big tech companies. The other is to, quote, establish a new system going forward in which newspapers aren't just competitive again, but can thrive. Past damages in lawsuits like these will vary by paper. If the lawsuit's successful, the papers could be entitled to, quote, treble damages settlements that are 3 times the actual damages that are proven to have occurred.
They're never gonna win this case. I mean,
Exactly
you know,
right.
I mean, typically, if you think about like what happened with Microsoft when there was concern about they control, the operating system and all the PCs, kind of what happened is that Microsoft said, okay, we'll be fair, we'll let competing browsers, come on our, allow people to use Chrome or stuff like that, even though they're making it more difficult, they've slipped, from that. But that's a typical remedy. I mean, the newspaper's problem is that basically, as you point out, they're a horse and buggy. There is no solution. Okay, with antitrust, other than that they're basically the horse and buggy, and their option, and some of them have tried to migrate, and some of them have somewhat successful, is to go online, create a paywall. Even though we could talk about the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times doing hit pieces, they actually have a business model that works. They actually are profitable. a lot of other newspapers have closed. You know, I mean that game's actually over. I mean, a lot of the damage to the newspaper industry is it's so long ago. I mean, who would you even pay if you established it with damages? I don't even think there's a corporate estate left on some of these newspapers to figure out who you would go pay for some newspaper that went defunct 10 years ago. You know?
Yep. So we've now gone through the big boring list of headlines, and we have exactly 6 minutes left to go through the tweets. So we'll try and do our best here. We won't get through all of them. And then I have a hard stop at the top of the hour. And then Messi has the Tech News Africa room opening up at the top of the hour, Messi, in 5 minutes, if I'm correct. So we'll jump over there.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah, in 5 minutes we're starting that. Thank you,
Here's
Tyler.
the first tweet that somebody sent in. Someone named Delian from the audience sent this one in, so I'm just retweeting it now. And it says that on November 15th, Russia demonstrated their ability to use space missiles to blow up a satellite. 2 weeks later, like December 1st, they are threatening to blow up our entire GPS constellation, leaving us blind if we overstep in regard to the issues around Ukraine and Belarus. And the article that is part of this tweet that I just retweeted says Russia issues threat to GPS satellites. And this is coming from gpsworld.com, which I don't know if this is a legitimate news source or not. Judge for yourself from the link, but it says the Kremlin warned it could blow up 32 GPS satellites with its new anti-satellite technology called ASAT, or ASAT, which is tested November 15th on a retired Soviet Selena D satellite, according to numerous news reports. Russia then claimed on state television that its new ASAT missiles could obliterate NATO satellites and blind all their missiles, planes, and ships, not to mention the ground forces, said Russian Channel 1 TV host Dmitry Kiselyov, rendering the West's GPS-guided missiles useless. It means that if NATO crosses our red line, it risks losing all 32 of its GPS satellites at once. The International Space Station Flight Control Team was notified of indications of satellite breakup causing 1,500 pieces of debris to threaten the station. Due to the debris generated by the destructive Russian anti-satellite test, ISS astronauts and cosmonauts undertook emergency procedures for safety, said NASA Administrator Bill Nelson. And we read that in real time on around November 15th when that satellite was destroyed. And with its long and storied history in human space flight, it's unthinkable that Russia would endanger not only American and international partner astronauts on the ISS, but also their own cosmonauts. And that was this quote that he gave at that time when that satellite was destroyed, causing a bit of panic on the International Space Station because there was a Russian cosmonaut on the ISS, and they were worried that the debris from this shattering satellite might cause, that's like thousands of basically bullets flying at hypersonic speed now in orbit, which if it collides with the ISS, they're going to be in deep doo-doo. It says Russia has demonstrated a deliberate disregard for the security, safety, stability, and long-term sustainability of the space domain for all nations, blah, 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 blah. So the bigger issue is, it's a really interesting evolution and a bit of the tension going on there.
Bring back to mutually assured destruction.
A company called Hello Hero raises $7.7 million. Thank you for that one, BB. It's for a online healthcare system. Just retweeted that one.
It's for kids. It's for kids only. So let's mention
online health for kids. Great. And then Manaz sent in this one that I'm sure everyone read. That Pfizer says a new study shows that 3 doses of Pfizer's vaccine protects against the Omicron variant. And BB sends in this one that TikTok considers monetization and creator retention in judging recommendation algorithm. A rare look into how TikTok chooses what to recommend. And it considers the creator retention and monetization as part of their algorithm. I just tweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account. And more than 300 scientists have told Mark Zuckerberg they want access to Facebook's data. Saying that Zuckerberg has a moral obligation to align Facebook's child and teen mental health research with established scientific standards, because they themselves, these 300 scientists, are saying, and this is important, that Facebook's research is not up to established scientific standards, which is incredibly important.
Are they requesting this of TikTok and everyone else?
No, but very interestingly, That means that, and kudos to NPR for pointing this out. When Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, shared the internal documents with the Wall Street Journal, and they released the documents, and Wall Street Journal came out with and created the narrative that Facebook research shows that Facebook is knowingly harming teen girls, young girls. Well, that was not research. That was an internal survey. That is not anything you can base any kind of actions or decisions on. That was one team member who got drunk at El Pollo Loco over the weekend, came into work, did a survey, unscientific, made a slide that she never assumed would ever be seen outside of Facebook for her coworkers at a presentation, and the Wall Street Journal took it way out of context. And it's not even based on actual research. It doesn't meet established scientific standards, which NPR, God bless them, actually did an interview with a proper, psychologist, clinical researcher, like my sister, by the way, who does exactly this. And then that researcher said, no, what Facebook's doing is not research. They can't base any real decisions on that. They don't knowingly know. You can't ask the subject, how do you think this makes you feel? That's not science. So, hence, the Wall Street Journal also cannot make the claims that it made against Facebook that has led to Adam Mosseri, Instagram CEO, now testifying before the Senate as we speak. Because they're claiming that Facebook knows something that they don't know. Because you can't know anything based on surveying a young teen girl how they think something makes them feel, because that ain't scientific research. That doesn't meet established scientific standards. Hence, you can't make any real conclusions from surveying young girls about how they think they make them feel about themselves. So the Wall Street Journal, it knowingly was intentionally misinforming their readers writ large and the public in general. And the New York Times, when they're regurgitating the Wall Street Journal's articles, and CNN and USA Today and the whole 20 of them, all ganged up together to throw all their combined gasoline on that manufactured dumpster fire to try and spread that narrative as big and as far and as broad as possible, informing the world writ large that Facebook is knowingly, intentionally ignoring their own research, which is not research, and intentionally harming young women, young girls. And now the scientists are coming out and saying 300 scientists have told Mark Zuckerberg, we want access to your data. And more importantly, we want you to start doing actual scientific research so that you can actually make informed decisions. Right. Well, you can't have it both ways. And no doubt, Facebook probably doesn't want to share this data with the scientists. And that in itself, you could argue that's kind of shady in itself. Why not engage the scientific community? It's a very interesting point. I predict and I bet that they will. I bet that they will start working with third-party legitimate scientists. I'm willing to bet that. But I'm also willing to bet that the Wall Street Journal is not going to apologize for intentionally misinforming and misleading everybody, including the senators who are forcing Instagram to come testify today, literally today, about how what it knows about harming young girls. So that takes us to the top of the hour, and 2 minutes over. I'm late for a call, and Messi's going to start the African Tech Newsroom, so we will see you over there. So thank you, everybody, for yet another fun, headline-filled tech news around the world. We will see you tomorrow. Ashita. Arigato gozaimashita. Okay.
Thanks, Tyler.
See you, everybody.
Thank you, Tyler.
Mata.
Bye-bye.